Hey there guys, it's me TheTacticalBrit, your home of breakdowns and explanations, and today I want to discuss the minimap in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. This is something that seemingly comes up a lot on Twitter, it's something that people are talking about, and today I wanted to address it. And in this video, I'm going to break down why Call of Duty has decided to remove the minimap, and whether or not this is a good move for the franchise, and I'm going to be giving a bit of for and a bit of against. So let's talk about the traditional status quo and the minimap in Call of Duty, which has more or less been something in the feature set since the franchise really began. Now, in my opinion, the minimap has always been a plague, and it's been a plague because of the red dots that it shows whenever anybody fires a weapon. Now, it's my fundamental belief that in any given shooter game, you shouldn't be penalized for using the actual thing that you need to win. For the most part, I really do believe that it's kind of nonsensical to make somebody appear as a red dot on a minimap when they fired their gun, because there's going to be a lot of situations where they need to do that, and it completely stifles positive gameplay, and definitely doesn't reward skillful players. If you think about it, as a skillful player, you could drop 5, 6, 7, 10 people, but it doesn't matter because every time you're appearing on the minimap, and it's only a matter of time before somebody swarms you, takes you down, or just gets that lucky shot because they know where you are. And ultimately, I believe that that feature set was always something that was a negative trait in Call of Duty. So why was this in, and why was it popular? Well, in the older days of Call of Duty, it was safe to say that the lane design kind of mandated understanding where your enemies were coming from. Now, I don't necessarily advocate that that should be from red dots appearing on maps, but it certainly helped in the sense that once you had captures of objectives, or once you'd made a play on a certain objective, you could lock down certain lanes with the understanding that enemies were still spawning on that side of the map. So if you captured A and B, you knew they were coming from C. But if somebody pushes too far, then you know the spawns have flipped and you know things have changed. But fundamentally, I feel like this has been a negative trait in the franchise and something that hasn't really allowed it to grow, at least in terms of competitive level. Now, that's not to say that Call of Duty doesn't have an excellent competitive scene, and the Call of Duty Championships are definitely up there in some of the flights of esports, but I really do fundamentally believe that this doesn't allow the average skillful player to really showcase their abilities because they're constantly being stifled by either spawn flipping, which is, as a game design feature, not exactly great, or just being stifled because they're using their primary weapon. So let me break down to you why Modern Warfare has made this change, and there's a number of reasons for why this has happened. First and foremost, we have the focus on guns themselves. Call of Duty is moving away from operators, it's moving away from abilities, it's moving away from movement, jetpacks, and everything in between. It's going back to its core roots, and fundamentally, with the new gunsmith installed, your weapon is your most powerful asset, and by no means in any sense of the word should that weapon be directly penalized by a red dot on a minimap because you're using something that's critical to your playstyle. And I really do think that that makes a lot of sense, and I just don't understand in 2019, where modern and more hardcore shooters are certainly being successful, that Call of Duty really needs a minimap. I don't think it's very popular in any given game at the moment, and even Battlefield has strayed away from things like spotting, which promotes things like red dots on screens. But the second and most fundamental reason is the change in map design ethos, and this is something that I think has gone amiss by a lot of the community, and I think has gone amiss by a lot of the competitive and more professional players. Now, Call of Duty is moving away from lanes. It's moving away from the triple arcade style, 3 lanes, do your job, push a lane, win engagements, etc, etc. It's now focusing on buildings, and when you move away from a lane focus, there's no longer the need to have things like minimaps in the game. Now, you could argue that, yes, minimaps with lanes make sense and minimaps without lanes make sense, but in my opinion, when you have a central design to a game that focuses on individual buildings being points of interest, then that should be your focus. You won't need a minimap to explain that to you. So Call of Duty is basically adding strategic points to their maps, and be it a large building that has lots of cover or a building that has really good sight lines or something in between, effectively those are your go-to visual cues in the game now. You don't need a minimap to tell you that there's somebody there because controlling that building is going to be vital for that player to make a play or for the team to capture an objective. And you can see this already in the gameplay that you're watching. Lots of people are pushing as though it's a lane-based scenario, but in actuality, they really should be locking down buildings and locking down regions. Now, I'm not saying they should be camping those regions, but what I'm saying is that when you have a map design that's focusing on areas of interest should be where you're operating, as opposed to sort of trying to push down roads in towards their spawns. And I think that that's a critical change that people aren't recognizing, which is why there's this big claim for the minimap to come back. People are getting killed from places they aren't expecting, and that's because they're not used to this new playstyle and different spawning system, because it's likely as well that with this new focus on buildings away from objectives, there's going to be some radically different spawnings as well. And all of this is a skill ceiling kind of thing. You need to understand here that if you have an ability to understand how certain maps have certain buildings that are critical to you playing well or your team being a successful team, then that is a skill-based feat. That is a good understanding of the map design and a good understanding of how the game flows and operates. And I think it was so early at this launch event where most of these guys had not played these maps before, that was what stifled them. They never really knew which building was going to be the building to look after, or which sight line or which place they should be going. And I think that's why they were getting killed from places they weren't expecting, but more importantly, I think that's why they felt they needed the minimap back, because they needed to understand where they were or what they were doing, and I really don't think that that is the case. So that understanding of map design and not being punished with red dots for shooting is really something that I think is a fantastic change in Call of Duty, and you're seeing it so frequently in some of the 2v2 modes where players who lock down a certain region on the 2v2 maps or take station in a certain building or something are being much more successful because they've pushed an area of interest, or they've pushed something of interest. And you see it in some of the multiplayer gameplay as well online, where, for example, people are pushing the palace building, they hold that down, that becomes the central focus, they cover all the exits, cover all the doors, and they're doing that job. Now, once you understand where your squad mates and teammates are with the outlines, which weren't in that build but were soon to be introduced, I really don't feel as though tactical awareness is anything that could really mandate the return of a minimap, and I really do believe that having understanding of map design, not being punished for red dots, and understanding where your teammates are three skillful feats that not only increases the skill level in Call of Duty, but allows the more average day-to-day player to showcase a better skill set if they are playing more consistently and playing at a much more competitive level. Overall, I really think this is an asset to the franchise, because I think a lot of players who come to Call of Duty whenever something's a bit off with their other game, or maybe they're not fancying something else, are always put off by the minimap. I personally find myself really disappointed by the minimap when I'm playing Call of Duty, because I'll be like, yeah, great, I'm doing really well, I'm taking out lots of people, I'm rotating positions, I'm doing everything I possibly can to avoid being killed, and doing everything within a relatively tactical manner, and then all of a sudden, boom, I've shot at somebody, there's a red dot on the screen, I get sniped from like halfway across the map, and that's that. And that's a really disappointing feature, I think, to have. You shouldn't have to be worried about whether or not you're going to appear on somebody else's screen. That's a hand-holding feature. It's a hand-holding feature that shouldn't feature in any kind of first-person shooter, in my personal opinion. So guys, that's about it from me today, TheTacticalBrit. Let me know what you would think in the comment section below. Are you glad the minimap's gone, or do you have a different opinion? As always folks, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next video.